Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in another episode of the Getting Personal podcast series that is hosted by Youth Transforming Narratives. My name is Balqis. I'm the founder and executive director of YTN, and I'm very, very happy that you're with us today, and hopefully you'll get to learn from our amazing speaker. I'm glad and honored to introduce Cynthia, who's with us today in our podcast. Cynthia is a political researcher and para-academic with experience in policymaking. Her advocacy is grounded in research, having worked with think tanks and published on a lot of issues, including climate finance and emerging market economies and security sector governance. She's also a TEDx speaker, and she's recognized as one of the most influential people of African descent, Global 140 awardee in politics and governance. And she has spoken in many different conferences, including the EU and AU summit. And in the past, in 2023, she has briefed the UN Security Council on future-proofing trust for peacebuilding. She currently works as a program coordinator for CAS. I don't want to say the full name in German because I'm sure I'll butcher it, and has collaborated with several organizations promoting SDGs and Agenda 2063 in Africa. She is a certified short-term election observer and served as the African Union's Youth Ambassador for Southern Africa from 2022 to 2024. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for taking the time for being with us today. I know you're very busy, so we really appreciate having you with us. And without further ado, I want to give you the floor to introduce yourself a bit more and telling us about your background before we move to the next question.
Thank you so much, Balkis, for that kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to join you on Youth Transforming on your platform, rather, and contributing to the discussion that we're having today. I served as the African Union's Youth Ambassador for Southern Africa, promoting youth inclusion into the continent's peace and security initiatives. And this is based on a decision that was taken by the African Union's Peace and Security Council to have more and more young people included and represented in decision-making institutions. I am one of the 5 young people that were appointed by the African Union, myself representing the Southern Africa region, and there were 4 others for the different parts of the region. Khulud Baguri for North Africa, there was Christian Achaleke for the Central Africa region, Mohamed Kunta for West Africa, as well as Diana Chando for the Eastern Africa region. So we were 5 young people that went on to advance the peace and security mandate, or the agenda of including young people into peace and security from 2020, the end of 2021, until we handed over in April this year to the new cohort of African Youth Ambassadors for Peace. And in my full time, I work with an organization called the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. It's a German political foundation that works to promote democracy, good governance, and accountability on the African continent. So that is what I do. I am a young person myself, very excited to have the opportunity to engage with other young people, not just in the Southern Africa region where I am, but also in different parts of the continent.
Great, thanks for that great intro. And so, what we always ask of our guests in this podcast is to tell us more about their journey, how they started, any challenges that they've been through, and lessons learned. And so if there is anything that you want to share with us in terms of your own journey, I know the beginnings of it, it's definitely also not easy for female African women to get involved in this field. And so if you want to tell us more about that and what you've learned so far from it.
You asked a question around some of the challenges that I have come across. I think first being a young person who's working in peace and security, and the first challenge is limited funding for youth initiatives across the continent. And I can see you nodding there because at Youth Transforming Narratives, this is probably something that you would have experienced as well, that just getting the requisite funding to do the work is very, very challenging. But outside funding is also coordination among people that are doing work. We have you in North Africa. They have several other young people who are doing fantastic work in Southern Africa, in my region. Examples being the 4H Foundation, which actually uses sport to bring different people of different political parties to play sport and then discuss peace and security. So these are different initiatives that we have, but in terms of coordination, it then depends on one person from the organization saying, okay, let's collaborate and do this. But at continental level, institutional level, we're not having as many organizations that are seeking to help young people collaborate and bring or create a network of young people that can partner. So apart from funding, it's coordination. In addition to coordination and limited resources, I think the existing stereotypes, and I love that the name of your organization is Youth Transforming Narratives, because the narrative is young people in Africa are disempowered. Young people are instigators of violence. For the North Africa region, if you look at cases such as the Arab Spring or the Yasmin Revolution in Tunisia, we find these as examples that are amplified, where people are saying, okay, but look at young people, they're a challenge, they're not great for democracy. But that is not entirely true. There are several other young people who are doing great work in terms of advancing democracy. Youth in Kenya who recently protested against the finance bill, youth in Nigeria who, protested, and it led to the dissolving of SARS, which committed a lot of police brutality. So these are just a few examples that showcase that young people are indeed a vanguard of democracy. And not only that, they're actually championing some of the sustainable development goals that you see behind me, either through technology, through innovative methods, and different initiatives that they're taking. So we really need to look into those existing stereotypes and have more and more people that challenge the negative stereotypes against the role that young people can play in politics, in development, as well as in peace building.
Yeah, I definitely cannot agree more. You touched on a lot of important points there. And so for you as a woman in peace and security, how do you navigate these challenges? What maybe kind of lessons learned throughout your career?
Oh, that's a very difficult one. I think not just lessons learned, but lessons I'm continuing to learn, right? Because I'm a female throughout my life. So I think apart from underrepresentation of young people and youth in decision making, it's also an intersection between not just young people, but also women. If you look at the current structure of the continent's leadership, only one president, the Tanzanian president, is female. And some might want to make a case for Ethiopia as well, but the decision making lies more with the prime minister than it does with the presidency. And even so, we're looking at two female heads of states out of 55 countries. So that becomes a challenge at the very top level, because there is no representation in terms of I think the decision making spaces we have on the continent, and that is replicated and mirrored in regional institutions, including SADC, including the African Union as a regional organization, or CENSAD, which is a community of Sahel states. So we see that mirrored across, and when you take it from regional level up to national level, even more jarring when you look at the representation of women in parliaments, and that extends to young people. So those are challenges that I am not immune to, and challenges that you also see when you're trying to advance youth peace and security. In addition to that is that both the women peace and security and the youth peace and security agendas are fairly new, with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250 being adopted in 2015 and unanimously recognizing the role that young people play. The same with United Nations Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. So these are fairly new frameworks if you compare them to some of the UN instruments like the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, as well as other instruments. So the longevity of these frameworks have also meant that it's a learning process. So if adopted in 2015, we're talking about less than a decade since that has been put in place. And some of the learnings, challenges that are being shown or that are evident in applying that framework are still being documented. So those are some of the challenges. And for the African context, last is social values or social and cultural practices that cannot or do not fully capture the role and contributions that not only youth but also women can make in development and peace building.
Definitely, no, that's very, very true. And so maybe on a final question is, how or what is one advice you would give to youth, but specifically to young women who want to be more involved in youth and peace and in peace and security as, a field for their potential careers?
My advice would be that the landscape has changed. We have moved from just peacekeeping to peace building, which means that that is more inclusive, more holistic, and women definitely have a role to play in terms of peace building on the continent. In addition to that, we've seen several examples drawing from the Maputo Protocol, which was adopted in my region in Mozambique, and several other cases where women have been champions of peace building. An example is the um, Ilwad Ilman from Somalia. She's one of the, I see you nodding because you probably are familiar with her work. And she was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 28 because of the work that she was doing in peace building. So we see that as an example that women do have a role to play in peace building, not just on the African continent, but globally. And I did come across some statement that said if women led institutions, perhaps we wouldn't have as many wars around. I'm not too sure how far-tree that is, but I do think it links back to issues around representation in decision-making processes and decision-making organizations. So maybe more inclusion of women and youth would also result in diverse perspectives and being able to implement our objectives in a different way. And to young people specifically, I would like to say that we're not only leaders of tomorrow, and we cannot wait for tomorrow. We have to take initiative and contribute to the future we want to see. And in closing, I'll quote the UN Director Representative for Africa, Ms. Ahuna, who says the Africa we want is the Africa that the world needs. So we all need to work together and contribute to the Africa we want. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. This was great, and I hope this would be insightful for the young people who would be watching in the future. And thank you so much again for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations to you and all the work you do. I wish you all the best. And I think going back to one of the points I mentioned, which is partnership and coordination, I do hope that you find other youth who are doing similar work and you guys collaborate and coordinate your efforts to ensure more impact. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.